Oh, I haven't been home since this morning. Which bank? Oh, that one that's in that little building. Yeah, that's a Wells.
Trina's tweeting already. He's got to be laughing. The
Believe me, I am aware.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Here?
Yes. Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Present. All right. Ray, would you bless us with a word?
Sure. Lord, there has been a mood of sensitivity in our community. There has been concerns expressed, compassion revealed, and a spirit that sort of leads us into our own understanding of what compassion and empathy is. Lord, we continuously pray for those, our brothers and sisters, who are still struggling with hurt. We simply ask that thou would touch us, energize us for service, be with us as a council as we meet and discuss. We ask it in your name.
Amen.
City Manager, let's go ahead and jump right into the program.
Yes, sir. At this time, we will begin the city council discussion with a review of the Columbia Compass, or an update, Envision 2036. Mr. Jonathan Guy, Vice President of Kinley Ford, and John Bellows, our planning administrator. Thank you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. How are you all? We are glad to be here to talk a little bit about Columbia Compass. We have been working pretty hard on this particular project, and are glad that we can spend a little bit of time with updating you on the process. So far, what we've done is we've reached out to a number of citizens, including advocates, employees, administrators, people in different civic organizations. We've done this through a lot of social media, surveying, and we believe we've reached about 3,400 people through our public meetings, through some of the responses we've gotten in surveys, and through social media. So how we've talked to them, like I mentioned, we've had some open houses in October. We're going to have some more open houses coming up next week. We've done 14 neighborhood meetings throughout the community. We have a very extensive mailing list where people have been able to sign up on their own to get updates. We've also done something called Lunch with a Planner. So we've engaged with people out in different business districts, talking to them about various topics. And we have a website that also has been promoting a lot of the information for people to access.
John, the Lunch with the Planner, you have it at like a local restaurant?
No, it's a brown bag lunch, so you bring your own lunch, and the planner is there. And so we've had it at the fountain in 5 Points. We have had it by the tables and chairs by the Meridian building. One day we did have some rain, so we actually had a rain date, which is our conference room over at Washington Square. And then each month we've kind of publicized a different topic. So we've talked about population and housing, so if people have that interest, usually what happens, it's a more open conversation and people just come and ask questions. Some people have sporadically come. Some people see us talking and they just say, what's this about, and start talking to us and the other people that have shown up. So it's been an interesting outreach to kind of see what works and doesn't work. From a demographic perspective for the survey, what we've learned, we have some overlapping circles there that represent the different influences. So we have 57% of the people who were surveyed live in Columbia. We have 55% who work in Columbia. And then we have 11% who attend school in Columbia. And you can see that overlapping number there within those circles. Also, we have over 35% of the respondents live in Columbia for 21 years or more. And then you can also see the response by age on the far diagram.
John, so you got these numbers from the actual questionnaire that you gave to everybody?
Yes, so on the survey, we actually asked questions like, how long have you lived in Columbia? And we gave a range. We also asked for their age. So those who did respond, that's how we're able to calculate
Can you compare those numbers to the sensors that we
With the census?
Since the sensors, the numbers that we get from population, from the demographics in Colombia, anything like that, is that?
We can compare. It's with this case, it's kind of a random sample. So we have 130,000 people in the city. We surveyed it. People could have been in the city limits, or they might have taken the survey and they live outside the city limits. So it's not. We can't really define it just to the city from that perspective. We did sort by zip code, so we also have some information of where they live from zip code. This is a map here of the survey respondents by zip code, so that was a pretty good transition there. And as you can see, some parts of the city were much more engaged than other parts of the city. And what I want to mention for our upcoming meetings this in next week, what we've done is we've done a lot of Facebook advertising of those. And what we're doing is in the zip codes where we did not have as much participation, we're actually boosting those posts to try to see if we can get a little bit more social media in those particular areas. But I will mention we had a little less participation in the survey for some of those areas, but when we went out into the neighborhood and we had those neighborhood meetings, some of the participation levels in those meetings were higher in the areas where we had lower survey participation. So in the areas that had very high survey participation were some of our lower numbers in attendance for those meetings. So it's kind of interesting to see different parts of town actually maybe prefer a different type of outreach.
John, I apologize if you already said it. And how much are we doing via just traditional snail mail and
we aren't doing anything with traditional snail mail. We do have a very large email list. I think it's in the thousands. We have all the neighborhood presidents on that email list. Those neighborhood presidents who don't have an email, we have made phone calls to them to try to push it out from that perspective. But we've also done some press releases. We've had some media coverage.
are we leveraging Channel 2? Channel 2? Are you leveraging Channel 2?
We've been doing some things on Channel 2. There's a couple videos on the website. So.
John, it might be helpful also maybe to share the link with us, and then we can push it out in our social media as well.
We can do that.
You can talk about it on date night.
I can.
So what we've heard.
Our city is.
What we've heard is we've heard about values. So as a city, we value our neighborhoods, our cultural offerings, our opportunities for engagement, protection of cultural and historic resources, and the walkability of Columbia. What we've also heard is some perceptions. So we've heard a number of things up here on the screen that came up. So on the survey, I should mention they were a lot of open-ended questions. And so from those open-ended questions, we kind of searched and combed through the information. And this is sort of some of the things we've heard about perceptions. And so we, as a city, there's a perception that we don't always prioritize certain things. There's that disconnected comment, which we've heard multiple times, disconnected neighborhoods, disconnected business districts. So that's a reoccurring theme that we have heard from other planning initiatives in the past. And also there's a lot of comments about infrastructure needs, a variety of comments, and about being innovative too.
Was there detail to go with all of that?
We do have an Excel spreadsheet. It's not posted on the website or anything, but
Did you share that with
we
us?
do have a spreadsheet that you could, it's very long, but you could start sorting through if you were
It'd
interested.
be interesting just to read more. I know obviously you
Sure.
have to generalize it for this, but getting down into some of that would be very interesting to read.
We can get that out for you all.
The worst thing that could possibly happen, of course, I think Councilwoman Devine sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of pushing this out to our various communities. It would certainly be good ASAP, I would think, to get that information, push it out to those persons who have questions
Mhm.
and see the whole presentation.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that would be, I think that would be ideal.
Yeah, we'll get you that information so that we can get
Very
that
good.
pushed out.
Yes.
John,
Yes, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, we talked about the attendance sort of varied different neighborhoods. The ones where we had sparse attendance, between then and now, have we done anything to communicate back with them? Or
So we had the larger meetings the 1st of October. We started our smaller meetings through November and December. And then the holidays came and we've been working, getting ready for the meeting next week. So we haven't done a lot of outreach in January, except for some things on social media and some emails.
the ones that I attended, I was surprised at the attendance, given the amount of information that was put out there. So just moving forward, I'm just kind of wondering, how do we, or do we need to go back to them? I'm not sure, but the information was good in the attempt to have folks give their input,
Mm-hmm.
and was good. But in some cases, I just thought it would have been good if there were more folks that were engaged and could participate.
Yeah, that's always a struggle. We find that sometimes we do a process and we get really good engagement, and other times we do the same thing and we get less engagement. And so it's kind of like throwing a dart at a dartboard. You never know exactly where it's going to land.
Got
But
very good dialogue in the small. You remember the
We did.
small groups.
we did have very good dialogue in those small groups.
It would have been good to have a larger group.
So we're really pushing, hoping that we're going to get a lot of people this next week.
Teresa, this might be, before you turn the page, John, Teresa, this might be more of a question for Alicia. But the printed collaterals we have, we got some really good content we've been putting out just on our strategic plan. And I mean, just not just in Columbia Campus, but just generally. What's happening in water sewer, what's happening citywide. Do we mail any of that out, or do we just have it in our public facilities for people to have? And
We have lots in the public facilities, Mayor. There was a time where we were doing some mailing.
Yeah.
You know, there's a certain, some of your constituents who prefer it that way, and we were still doing that for a
Yeah,
while.
I'm just-
but I'm not sure that we've done in a mass amount this type of information.
sat down with a dozen mayors in December, talking about a number of different things, primarily around smart cities. And the second bullet point, everyone says that people in the city say the same exact thing. You know, in an age in which information is ubiquitous. I mean, it's you're still being covered by the press. Your website's active. You're on every social media platform. I know we're active on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Continue to push information out through even some now non-traditional sources like weekly papers and everything else. So, but people still can't find information, and I wonder if that is more indicative of just human nature, or if it is in fact that the information is not out there. And I say that to say that obviously when you're running political campaigns, people do direct mail for a reason. They want to make sure that it gets right into someone's hands. And I wonder if we need to look at for the things that are most important to us, putting it in the mail so that someone of whatever demographic, every citizen gets it in hand, and just start putting some numbers to that. Howard?
Two things, Mayor. Number one, ability to find information. Our website is woefully out of date, and we need to prioritize getting
That's the new website.
website.
Oh,
You
that,
can't find things on it. It's too
sometimes it
much
is,
stuff on it.
sometimes it's difficult. Oh, you think it's too much?
It's too much stuff on it. It's
Okay, well,
a lot
now,
of stuff is-
I'll take that, but woefully out of date, I might have to push back.
I would love to sit down with you and page through and show you, especially on
I
some
understand.
sections where you cannot find information. It's just too much stuff and it's not kept up to date. But
Okay.
I'd like to brag on John and on the Columbia Compass. These little sheets that you put out monthly,
Very helpful.
they are
Great.
very helpful and very easy for me to get some good stuff to take to a neighborhood meeting.
They are good.
You can take one of these.
Very
and
useful.
speak for 30
Yeah,
minutes
very
at
useful.
a neighborhood meeting,
And they're all on the website, so anybody, you can always direct people to the website to get more or print their own. Or
if you can find them.
I think it's pretty good on the website.
Send them the link.
All right, I think we've covered this slide. I think we'll move on to the next one. So within this particular map here, this is the responses, and you can see what we did was we had an interactive map, and we asked people to actually, take their mouse and actually put down information. And so they provided lots of information in terms of where they thought there was opportunities, weak places, strong places. And you can see some of these overlap. I think it might be a little bit washed out on the screen, but that was a lot of helpful information. And in that data that we collected, a lot of people not only put a point, but they actually put a little tag onto that point that said, I think this is an opportunity for blank, or I think this is a weak place because of blank. So although this map really is a generalization, we do have more sort of metadata behind that that we can dig
Right there where
into.
it seems like a cluster of opportunity dots, where is that?
I'm going to guess.
Riverfront, the river?
So this is Elmwood, and then this would be Blossom. So it's basically that whole corridor there is the riverfront. We asked the question of I want Columbia to be, and when we sorted through that data, these are the words that that came up the most. So you can see in each of these words, their font size is relative to the number of times that word came up. So you can see vibrant and safe and friendly, and so those were kind of some really good cues for us of what people were really wanting Columbia to be in the future.
Clean brings everything together.
So the next thing, what we're going to do is Shane is going to pass out some little response devices, like a little remote, and you're going to take a little bit of a survey for each of you. The first questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, the first questions are really just for you to become familiar with the device and the process so that you're kind of familiar with that, and then Jonathan will go through the rest of the questions. And then I'm going to close.
Everybody knows how you voted or not?
Now, good afternoon. Does everybody have their little keypad polling device? What I'll tell you is it doesn't work anywhere else, so make sure you leave it on the table so I can take it back with me. Don't feel like you need to take it home or anything like that. But it is a pleasure to be in front of you and spend a little time with you. I love to collect data. We've been working with John to collect a lot of data on the city to provide information to enrich this community. And so we want to walk through just a series of questions real quickly with you. This is anonymous, so you can push the button on there. You can push it as many times as you want until I tell you to stop, so you can change your mind. So don't feel like if you select an answer and you don't like the answer that you can't change the answer. But let's start out with something fun. So select your 2 favorite foods from the list that you see up there. So we've got cereal, salad, sandwiches, cookies, and ice cream. Ice cream would be my favorite, but I'm not trying to bias you by any means. So let me know whenever we'll turn my screen.
Give her one.
You want us to push now?
Absolutely. Push away. Select 2. All right, everybody made their choices? All right, so we get to see now. Here's the results. So it looks like salad and ice cream. So my bias did work a little bit. But now you see how this kind of works. So, and it's just a process for us to take a look at some interesting questions as we kind of go through this. And we'll use this as we sort of round out the plan. All right, so rank the following food items from the most favorite to the least favorite. We're going to do one more test because I want you to see how this works. We had you pick the top 2. Now what I want you to do is go through each of these, A, B, C, D, and E. Pick the order that you like. So if you want cereal to be first, push that A first. If you'd like ice cream to be first, push the E first, and then move forward. And the reason this is important is that these are 2 test questions, and we're going to answer a couple questions like this. I want to make sure everybody understands the process before we move forward. I'm not that interested in your favorite types of foods. So everybody
Chris
in?
is though.
It might be good information.
He's looking for content this week. So.
Absolutely. Okay. All right, everybody got everybody? All right, so let's see where we're at. Okay, so you can see now the statistical, when we look at ranking, you can see how it sort of changed there ever so slightly between the 2. So let's jump into a real question here. So, in your opinion, do the citizens of Columbia have a shared identity as a city? Yes or no? Everybody in? 50-50. Very interesting.
Now, how's that possible with 7 people voting?
There are 8.
Who didn't vote?
8 now.
There are eight
Okay,
now.
8 now. Thank you, Mom.
All right. Let's move on to the next one.
Politicians.
What are our 3 best assets? So pick 3 from the list that you've got here. And we've got a lot. Public and parks and public space, cultural activities, historic resources, quality of life, size, lower cost of living, diversified regional economy, diverse population, the rivers, higher education. And there are no wrong answers.
That's a trick question, y'all. Be careful.
I promise you it's not. All right, everybody in, or are we? Okay. All right, let's see what we get here. Interesting. I would agree. The rivers, followed by its little diverse population, lower cost of living, and then we've got a pretty good spectrum across the board there, around the 10%. Of the following, what are the top 3 challenges your constituents face? Select those in the order of importance. So you can see A through J there: lack of job opportunities, access to affordable housing, access to quality schools, transportation options, access to quality natural resources, deferred maintenance of public facilities and infrastructure, lack of investment or reinvestment, lack of shared sense of community, perception of safety, and public health issues. Quite a list. Remember to pick your top 3. Everybody good? All right, let's see what we got. Interesting. Very interesting. Another ranking. What are the top 3 challenges your constituents faced to attracting new residents or retaining residents? Again, select in the order of importance. And you'll notice that A through J are the exact same as what we had before. Everybody good?
No.
Okay. I'll wait just a little bit more. Everybody's in. It's almost like Jeopardy.
Question, are these the actual questions that they get asked?
The community?
Some of the questions you're being asked today will be on the survey that will be published next week. Some of them have been written more specifically for you. So like this one is your constituents. Obviously, if you're a citizen, you don't have a
Yeah.
constituent. So
Right.
this is a question that but then there's some slightly different questions, but we're testing to see what they have. And they have a much bigger survey.
They do.
Today you have a short survey.
So it's just a suggestion. I would I would say perception of quality schools, because I would argue as a Richland 1 parent that we have great schools, but there is a perception that we don't have high quality schools.
Well, I don't know if that's 100%. Yeah, not all your schools are at the top level. You can't say that.
Well, not all of them, but this district itself has a lot of opportunities, and I think that is an issue of attracting new residents, because there's a perception.
Let me say,
I'm saying there's a perception, but when you go, and I would encourage you guys. Thursday night is the state of the district, and Dr. Witherspoon will be sharing. But there's a lot of great things, and if you look actually at this year's report cards, a lot of schools rank low, and everybody universally throughout the state are challenging it because of the way the state has issued the report cards.
I don't
So
think this is
anyway,
an attack.
as a current parent of Richland 1,
and
I
a
would
wife of a
challenge
commissioner.
that.
your point.
So one of the reasons we did decide to
Yes, as a
ask
wife
you
of the
for this,
chairman of the school board. Yes,
one of the reasons we did
thank you, Steve.
One of the reasons we did ask you to, we were doing the survey with you before we actually go to the public was we did want to hear some of that feedback as we went through. So thank you. That is one of those things that we've heard very specifically from people, the way it's phrased, but we've also know that it's perception. So it's that struggle of how to work.
Notice there's
Because we say
not, there's,
because we
there's
say
no
perception
questions
of
on there
safety.
about, but there's no questions on there about ability to get building permits or anything like that. I noticed John and them left those kind of questions out.
The everyday citizens probably not
but,
gonna name those.
what I noticed during the discussions and the ones I attended,
All right, move on.
these topics invariably came up anyway in terms of discussions from the folks in terms of what they would like to see.
Focused and get
So,
control of this meeting.
You know, I think you're already getting pretty good feedback.
He's on
on
vacation.
these
No response,
topics.
no response necessary. Let's keep on.
There we go.
'Cause we're gonna start talking about parks in District 1 in a second.
There you go. You can kind of see where we are across the board there, with the top three, or the first three, A, B, and C, taking the lead there on that. So let's jump to our next question. It deals with businesses here
There you go.
in the community. Select the three greatest challenges Columbia's
on there.
businesses face. You can see attracting, retaining talent, commercial industrial burden, access to appropriately scaled properties / facilities, high quality or modern infrastructure, and that could vary in how you interpret infrastructure, desirable housing options, perceived quality of life, lack of shared city identity or image, perceived quality
Age
of
better,
schools,
Jamaica?
Thank you, yes.
Okay.
lack of a
They
safety
respond
net,
quickly to you.
workforce skill set. Fill in your results, and we'll take a look at this. Everybody in? Let's take a look. Interesting.
So it's commercial tax base, high quality infrastructure, achieve quality schools, talent.
Some interesting information there. All right, let's take another stab at something else here. Which of these outside challenges should be the city's greatest priorities? Please choose two. Lack of a diversified corporate philanthropic investment, non-taxable properties, SCDOT ownership of roads, unfunded state, federal mandates and or legislation, perception of school quality, culture of deferring maintenance, and lack of collaboration between jurisdictions and or agencies. Everybody good? All right, let's see. All right. Very interesting.
Really?
What are the largest internal challenges for city government? Please choose two. Attracting and retaining employees, coordination with outside agencies, lack of funding, collaboration, communication between city departments, setting and adhering to priorities, funding allocation, facility and infrastructure maintenance. All right, everybody good? Okay. Again, no right or wrong answers here.
There's some wrong ones up there.
Select three investment opportunities that you believe would have the greatest positive impact on Columbia. Parks and public spaces, the riverfront, infill and redevelopment, gateways and corridors, existing neighborhoods, business districts, greenways, and then cultural and historic resources. Yes, select three. Doesn't matter the order, just select three. All right. Let's see what we got here. Riverfront, absolutely. existing neighborhoods. You can see the like, and then we get a spread across in third position. In your
Go back,
opinion,
go back, go back, go back. You jumped that one.
can't
quick.
jump back. I can pull that up in a little bit. I need to jump back out. I got to finish the survey though. So, in your opinion, which two items would be the greatest catalyst for the city? It'll mess up the recording is what it's doing. Quality development of the riverfront, connected greenway system, development of intermodal transportation hub in the central Midlands and beyond, smart city implementation, rail consolidation, property tax reform, or focusing economic development efforts on target sectors.
That's a easy one. You can't afford anything if you don't have F.
Everybody good? There we go. You can see there the results. So number 2 on property tax reform, first being quality development of the riverfront. Okay, to your point there, generally, how would you prioritize the city's limited funding resources over the next 10-year period? Fewer but larger scale projects, more but smaller scale projects throughout the city, a combination of both, knowing that both will take longer to complete. All right, everybody good? Let's see what we got here priority-wise. Interesting. Okay. Rank the following statements in order of importance. A, being the implementation of projects and programs should be focused in the core of the city and along corridors. Implementation of projects and programs should be balanced equally across council districts. Implementation of projects and programs should be equitably identified areas that have been left behind or suffered greater hardships first. So rank A, B, and C. Remember to put whichever number in first or letter in first that you'd like to see is the most important. All right. Everybody in? There we go. And you get to see the results. Okay. That concludes our little survey. I'll turn it back over to John to finish it.
So while Jonathan just kind of summarizes all of that, I just wanted to follow up, and we've kind of talked about our public meetings next week. We are sending out emails about that. We have put some posts on Facebook, so you can go to Columbia Compass, and one way you might be able to from social media, if you actually like that and people are following you on your Facebook or on your Twitter, maybe they'll pick up that feed from all of you and share it as well. So if you could share that. And we will follow up with an email to all of you with some links of where you can, we'll set up an email, one email that that you can just easily forward to your constituents, and then we'll send you another email that has some links and resources for you if you don't have those. Jonathan, do we have anything else, or?
Teresa,
Yes.
and John, in your program, if you're not seeing the level of participation, the raw numbers, the unique participants that you want to see, give some thought if the budget allows for some snail mail to go out, maybe to a sample of folks demographically across the city. That might be helpful.
Yeah. I kind of think too, there are some areas where you do have pockets of seniors who aren't
Yeah, absolutely. That's
electronically in tune, so we need to figure out a way to get them more involved.
You can really curate the list, even if we. I'm not sure how much notice we need, but even though maybe even an insert or something like that.
You did.
Okay. Just can't get to the website. Thank you, guys.
John,
Very
good
much.
job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Good job.
We'll next move into our 2020 Census Complete Count Committee discussion. I know council has brought this up a couple of times, and so as Krista kept hearing it, she sent me an email, and Nikki said, I think this is the direction council's trying to go, so we shared with Mayor Benjamin the idea of the Complete Count Committee, and Krista will explain how that works. Thanks, Krista. Our Planning and Development Services Director.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. So, 2020 census is coming up, and obviously it's a very important endeavor for the federal government, but it has a lot of impacts locally. The census has been going on since 1790, every 10 years, and it's a count of the people, obviously, but why it matters to us beyond making sure that our population stays highest in the state is both political power and funding. The census is used to help redistrict, of course, draw your district lines, state legislative district lines, the apportionment of Congress, and then money and impact. So right now, over $675 billion a year is distributed to state and local governments based on census data. So the higher the numbers we can get, the more accurate count we can get, the better for our local government. So there's around 16 large census-guided programs, and that goes everything from transportation, CDBG funding, education funding, are guided by the census count. So the census has recommended, it's by no means mandatory, what is called a complete count committee. We as a local government have done all of the technical work we need to do up to this point with the census. GIS has done a terrific job. Someone in my staff has transferred the actual accounting of addresses over to them, making sure our boundaries are accurate, the addresses that the census has is accurate. So we are where we need to be with regard to that at this point in time. Now it's about really a PR and marketing campaign to try to get the count to where it needs to be. And that's where the census recommends the complete count committee. Some states have established complete count committees and have funded them with some of that money going to local governments. At this point, South Carolina has not done so. Some local governments are stepping up and going ahead and doing so. The reason it's so important now is because people are rather suspect of the federal government at this point in time. So it's going to take local voices, trusted voices, to go out and tell people how important this is, that the privacy of their data, it's secure, and how to actually be counted. So this year, they are going to allow for online response via the census, and I believe Ms. Wilson has already been contacted by the library, Melanie Huggins. They want to start to jump in and figure out how they can help with outreach to get people online and responding to the census. So what happens, the census sets out how you establish the committee. I've reached out to the Atlanta Regional Office. They were obviously out of work for a while, and I imagine their backload is a bit high, so I'm hoping to hear back from them soon, because they would actually generally come and give this presentation to you. But they establish the process. The highest local elected official establishes a chairperson for the committee. That chairperson then establishes subcommittees. Those subcommittees range from government, education, faith-based, media, housing, recruiting, business, senior citizens, and they all establish goals and trying to figure out which communities to go into to get the word out, what activities to engage in.
It's all voluntary.
It's all volunteer. However, there is, generally speaking, some funding that is required. But most communities, it's a combination of public and private dollars that go into this, because a lot of businesses, nonprofit organizations realize the importance of a correct count. So some of the activities that people go into, got to develop the barrier lists, host workshops. Some have a march to the census in March of 2020, just all sorts of creative ways of trying to get the information out. Whenever you go out to places, telling your constituents about what it means to them as a citizen and by the way, I borrowed this from the census, so thank you, census. I just want to give credit where it's due. And I'm almost through here. So the chairs and the subcommittee chairs are chosen through this process.
Why haven't they ever tied this to your taxes? Everybody's got to file their taxes. And it'd be the
Not
easiest
everybody.
way to count.
Not everybody files taxes.
That's the one who doesn't want to be on.
Get funds, you gotta get it somehow, right? I mean, why isn't it attached to every federal, if you're getting assistance or you're paying taxes, why isn't it attached to that and made it a part of the process? I mean, it makes a lot more sense to me.
Census counts people, not taxpayers.
Yeah, but my point is if you have to file for taxes or you're filing for assistance, you could make it as part of the process that you have to fill this out to receive it. So if you get,
There are a lot of people that won't hit either one of those
Right.
categories that need to
what do you mean they wouldn't?
they don't pay taxes.
And they don't get assistance?
Well,
How's that
Everybody.
possible?
they
You
don't-
gotta do one or the other. You
no, they
can't
may
live
not
by.
be citizens.
Not every,
If they're here on census day, they're counted, whether they're legal or not.
We're gonna slip into a political discussion in a second. We're not gonna go there. We've got to stand up a complete count committee. We've got to resource it.
All the illegals.
The undertone, the unstated challenges here is that Commerce is not supporting some of the aggressive grassroots efforts that Ms. Green and others have run in past years. So if communities don't stand up their own efforts, then I think the reality of an undercount is before us.
so that's why we're doing this year, because Ms. Green was here.
She did
A while ago.
Some of the robust efforts you've seen every 10 years will not be supported by Commerce. And that's obviously the President, Secretary Ross's prerogative. But it does not mean that we ought not stand up our own effort. Teresa, let's look at Baltimore and Houston. There are a few other places we can share as much information that we have at hand as well, and see what our effort ought to look like. I think including Melanie and a whole bunch of other stakeholders that make sense would make a lot of sense. But can we get some consensus on standing up a committee and also resourcing it to some degree for active and aggressive marketing? Let's look at the inserts and water bills as well.
Can we get a budget
Yeah, absolutely. Come back to
Before
us
we-
with a budget. Yeah.
march forward?
The census is extremely important because it lasts for a decade, and so much of our money comes back from population, not only the amounts that Krista was talking about, but if you look at the local option sales tax, 80% of the local option sales tax.
Somebody's birthday.
All the fellows back there like, what in the world is that? Usually it's Sanford and Son, y'all. But
80% of the local option sales tax, which directly impacts our funds here in the city of Columbia, are based on the census figure. And one of the things that we can do, we've got less than 12 months to do it now, but we can go and annex as many schools as we can. And Andrew needs to get busy and bring us some bodies.
I think you've seen him bring
We-
us
we-
some bodies.
you-
But we are
seen-
set right now with regard to our.
yeah, they've been, and what Krista hasn't mentioned and Teresa had mentioned is that in terms of data manipulation, notice they've been doing all of that work behind the scenes. But I agree, let's keep moving forward. A number of things to make sure the numbers are most representative, but the key is really making sure people are engaged and feel comfortable responding. So come back with a budget, but we got to move forward. So let's do that.
You're welcome.
As we transition to Robert, the room skews a little young right now. All the fellows stand up for a second. Do a very quick introduction of yourselves. Who you are, where you're from, please.
Can't hear you.
Junior at Dartmouth. Yumi? Yeah, once you guys sit down so you can see the second row. They're bright. They're bright. They read. They write. They research. Use them.
Are you
Best-
allowed to do some work for us and do some research?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Everybody but you. actually, you might get some
Hey,
good
that
research.
means I get
Yes.
half of you.
Hey,
Not all of you, but half.
run all of his research by me first. No, but really talented young people volunteering their time for the city. Use them. They're here getting experience. But we're all working to build
Who's
a
the
city.
point person?
Ariel Cathcart.
And I tell you what it reminds me of. I thought you were our quarterback. No.
Which one?
Wait just a minute. I thought you were our quarterback. You looked the part.
Like Ronnie Bass or something? You
I
thought?
Maybe I know who the quarterback is. There's a facsimile sitting in the room. Thank you so much. I like to use you some.
Ed, come back to earth, Ed.
Give me your, I'd like to know who you are.
You wanna use him because of his looks?
That's right. I tell you, I like that hair.
Don't stop.
that's
Don't
called-
stop, Reverend. Keep going.
That's called jealousy. That's all that is. He is jealous. He got hair.
You call it what you want, I like the hair.
I'm surprised you haven't asked for this clippings yet.
Mr. CFO,
Water rate.
put some hair in the budget for Mr. McDowell.
Thank you. Hair tonic. Hair gel.
All right, let's keep it moving. Thank you, young people. Thank y'all. All right. Mr. Chambers.
Oh, no.
Thank you, Krista.
Hold on to your pocket.
If you, Krista, if you have some thoughts as to
So our next item, item 3 is our water and sewer rate study. Mr. Robert Chambers, principal with Black and Beach Management Consulting, LLC.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be here and to serve in this capacity. This presentation goes about initiating or kicking off this cycle of the water and sewer rate study work that we've done. The goal and the objective here is just to present what we'll do, talk a little about the journey, how we got here somewhat, and then ultimately get feedback and direction from you as necessary. Okay? So, in getting into it, what are the drivers of Columbia? So you've seen this slide in the past, and the reason why it keeps coming up is because we believe it to be very important with regard to how you manage your utility, and not just managing your utility, but managing it in a sustainable manner. Currently, this study, goes about, establishing that financial roadmap that's important to understand, how you can meet your obligations going forward. But in understanding that financial roadmap, we also have to look at operationally, are we, catching all the costs associated with operating in a sustainable manner? And more importantly, that your stakeholders, your customers and other constituents understand what all this means. As such, maintaining revenue stability, maintaining sufficiency across the utility fund, making sure that you're resilient as a utility, looking about continuing to implement your capital and operating programs. And when we say that, we may mean people, processes, and technology. You know, how we go about pricing the utility services you provide, engaging your stakeholders, and ultimately staying competitive with your neighboring utilities. We see these items to be, you know, implicit drivers of your business, and we'll continue to monitor these drivers, you know, as we continue this journey. And it's, you know, please ask questions if you have questions as we go through. So how did we get here? This table outlines just a little bit of a history of, you know, what our revenues and costs look like and how we're meeting what we call debt service coverage. Debt service coverage is net revenues, which is revenues less expenses, divided by debt, meaning your annual debt, and it gives you a ratio. The target internally is about a 2.0, which is row 7, and we're hovering at and around that 2.0 range. So, you know, we're growing and we're meeting our target.
Why
And that's
2.0?
And that's an internal target.
Internal, but that's not required by bond or anything.
No, your bond target is a 1.2, and you're at a, yeah.
But it helps us with cost of capital.
Right.
It helps us with cost.
It helps you with your
Absolutely.
cost of capital. It helps you with your bond rating. You know, the rating agencies like to see when you
Higher up.
adequately meet your coverage requirement, and it just provides a you know, a good perspective of how you're running your business.
Okay.
So, looking at this table, you know, historically, when we've looked at the history of what you've done with rate increases, we've seen some lumps. And what we call lumps is years we may have an increase, years we may not, multiple years we may not. It is to the testament of this body of taking the action necessary to implement the increases as needed. You know, recently we were part of a bond issuance which was done by Columbia Water, and one of the positive comments that came out of this effort by the rating agency was, you know, your stability as an organization and your proactive approach to rate making, to taking action. And these were some of the positive comments the rating agency drew from you as an organization that has allowed you to have a good credit rating. So we just wanted to continue to show and track and highlight the importance of what, you know, we've done, you've done, you know, as the head of this body.
That was December.
Correct. So the storm.
And again, that was the first time we've done
Stormwater.
stormwater bond, and then to have such a high rating, that shows that it's working.
Yes, sir.
The magic's working. All right.
So on this slide, what we wanted to do is highlight some significant or just some events that have happened, you know, over the last few years. So let's see, here's a little glare. So as a part of this, what we call integrated financial planning paradigm, we have had to deal with some of these issues. For example, loss of a significant customer.
Yeah, but I disagree with that.
It's okay. Just in terms of cash flow, I mean, just keep on going.
The value of what we got back and the cost of service improvement that we were gonna have to do in that area, and then you turn back the taps that were returned to us, the value to us is much greater than anything. So I think that's not a true statement, and I would argue with you on that.
He's in the macro. It's still nonetheless a significant event. So
Yeah. And that's
however you frame it. So
Okay.
keep on trucking.
Okay. The implementation of your capital program, Clean Water 2020, the impacts as it relates to consumption and costs as a result of flooding and rain events, you know, building out your stormwater system, looking at adjustments to Columbia Water as an operation, you know, and potentially, you know, extending service to new customers. all these things have happened and have an impact, whatever the impact may be, on the manner by which you currently operate and you plan to operate going forward. And these are things we've had to deal with as a part of this journey. So, looking at the financial forecast that was presented to you last year, we went about implementing a 9.76 rate increase last year, and based on the forecast last year, we're looking at somewhere just under 6%. You know, we will look and work through forecasting and, you know, updating / creating the new forecast going forward. But we just wanted to highlight to you what we presented last year as it relates to potential increases, and, you know, use it as the baseline to start this analysis going forward.
How much are we continuing to do bulk rate?
When you say how much, what do you?
How much volume are we doing bulk rate that we're not getting regular rates?
Any entities
Yeah.
are we doing it with?
I'm not able to say off the top.
We do wholesale water, Councilman. We don't have a bulk rate right now. It's, that's the all other rate that we, so town of Chapin, Winsboro, those types of customers, we do have that sort of rate. We are, and part of Robert's work is going to be looking at a large volumetric user, you know, moving forward because of some of the discussions we've had around economic development. But right now, there is no wholesale bulk rate per se, rate classification. It's the all other rate, which is fairly
guess I'm
close to.
Trying to understand the volume of that, and are we equally spreading in, I mean, the cost of business for us increases, and to equally pass that on to the folks who are receiving that in some proportion. I mean, volume's different than a house, but, you know, we're asking an individual homeowner to constantly take an increase. You know, are we equally spreading that out?
It's a great question, I think, and something that Robert can help us look at. I think there is a very small differential between the residential rate and then commercial, industrial, and then the other rate. I was very minimal difference.
Make sure we share that in the analysis.
Yes, sir. We should
And although I don't, I'm sure you can say something. Although I really don't want to talk about Winsboro, I would be curious to see where we are in that.
Well, and I think too is, and I think going forward, we need to make sure that, I know there's a gap between government entities and, you know, the state, and that we need to make sure that we're applying that, because if they're not paying at least what our homeowner is paying and rate equivalent, then we need to make an adjustment, because that's unacceptable.
To include Fort Jackson?
Huh?
To include Fort Jackson?
Everybody.
No. Well, for Jackson's, I mean,
I'm seeking clarity because
we
it said
I think we
agency.
maintain our relationship with Jackson says that they get the lowest rate. Now, as it relates to Chapin and
That's what I'm seeking clarity, Mr.
in
Rickman.
Winsboro,
I mean, we don't know what, I think before we
Let's share the
we
information.
say, I think let's get the information and discuss it.
but
All entities.
Yeah.
it's worth.
And then we can weigh out the benefits and so forth, but, you know, we can't keep going back to the same well, which is our homeowners.
I agree. Our ratepayers are system-wide period, but certainly to our folks in the city. This is not a question for you, Robert, but Clint, Teresa, has Windsor moved forward with seeking alternative sources of water? Do you know that?
They do have they've installed a water line to the Broad River.
Okay.
But they're still purchasing up to 1 million gallons from us.
I don't miss
Per day.
per day.
Up to per day. I don't think they use.
Servicing Blythewood. Yeah. Again, I don't want to talk about that too much anymore. That was not fun the last time we did it, but it'd be worth it, part of the overall update, particularly as we look at shared responsibilities, burdens, and benefits. Daniel's talking about. All right, Robert.
So,
Can I, question, since, if you don't mind going back on the ratio question. So you're predicting to maintain the 2-point ratio, debt service ratio, coverage ratio, is to go up on your rates for 9.76, right? And on the other slide,
5.98, 5.98, 5.98,
on 20,
We just did that one, so 5.98 would be this
just under 6%, 5.98.
okay. So going back on the previous one, how did we get here? And then the debt ratio has been more than projected at 2.12. Does that give you an inclination that maybe you should adjust some of these rates or some of these numbers?
Okay. Sorry.
What was that question?
So the debt ratio,
Actual
they're
debt
predicting
ratio is
or projecting at 2.1, 2.0. For the past 4 years, we actually surpassed that. So was that part of the calculation to come up with the rate increase for this year and every other year? Obviously, we've maintained that or even
that service
does
coverage?
better because of,
2.12 last year,
Yeah.
2.12, what was it, 2.12? I think I saw earlier.
and the year before.
So,
So I'm curious, was that part of your calculation, that part of your estimates or something?
no problem. And may I step away from the mic? So, totally understand your question. And this is a historical overview of what happened. Our forecast says going forward, this is what we anticipate may happen based on the conditions at that point in time. So looking at all 5 years, just as we did coincidentally, in 16 and 17, we're at about a 2.1. 14 and 15, we're at a 1.87 and a 1.0. So you make the forecast based on the best conditions you have at hand and go forward. So to come back to answer your question, we wouldn't just say because we have a 2.0 currently, we should then reduce rates or not look at rates. What we will do is look at the conditions at that time and try to make the best forecast going forward based on those conditions.
Robert, as I remember it, when you came in about this time last year, the predicted rate increase was more than 9.75, and you were delighted when you came back after your study and said, we don't need to go up 11%, you can go 9.75.
That's correct. It was like 12%, 13, 14, somewhere in that range. Yes, sir.
What you may do this time, instead of the forecast of 5.98, hopefully if we still have really good numbers, it may be less than that.
Yeah, what we'll have to go through the process and yes, sir.
Not if you transfer money, Howard.
Yeah, well, and the rate, well, you stop that. Don't stop. But the debt service coverage ratio is the amount of cash we have available to cover our obligations. I mean, so the relationship between that and the rate it's not the same.
It has a
But certainly making sure we have cash available to meet our obligations. Obviously, rate affects that. I think 2 points need to be made. One is one that Howard just made, is that the proposed rate increases are significantly lower than what we've talked about previously. Yeah. And then also the bifurcated approach we've taken to meeting our needs in terms of debt issuances and cash over the last several issues has helped us significantly as well. And we're not borrowing everything; we're actually paying as we go, and I think that's been important to note as well.
So the 5.98 is, it puts us in an adjustable based on situation, the amount of usage and that. So it very well could go up.
we'll have to see. We'll have to go through the
So
analysis.
I thought we were gonna settle in at 5.98.
We'll have to see.
Okay.
So moving into our study approach. Our study approach is a bottoms-up approach where we look at your billing information and your rates, to go about calculating revenues based on the breakdown of costs by all your cost centers and how you budget and track your costs. We incorporate all the costs, compare it to the forecast of revenues at the time to answer the question, what are the annual requirements and, how are we doing to meet those requirements? Then we go through the cost of service. We've spoken about equities. We go through the cost of service to say how much should be collected from each service type. Basically, the different classes or type of service you provide from this business unit, from the Water and Sewer Fund, from Columbia Water. And then the third and final step goes into actually pricing and understanding how you should collect those revenues. So that's the three-step process to our study approach. So some areas of focus, and this time around we wanted to just highlight these areas of focus based on the three-step approach. So looking and maintaining the financial integrity of the system, meaning debt service coverage, risk mitigating funds, fund balance, look about sustainably implementing your capital program, your Clean Water 20.
So that brings up a good question. So today, obviously, we're coming through the consent decree. We're making improvements. What point? Because we're not maximized, obviously, in our MGDs. So when do we quit putting in capital, and when is it just pure maintenance? Do we have a point that we get there that it balances out from the investment? Because at some point we're going to have rebuilt everything.
We're at a point now, and Clint speak more purposefully about this, but one of the things that I have been asking him, Joey and Dana and Jeff and everybody to look at is how do we also start preparing ourselves to pull back off the program as far as the management
it's
of
just
the
O&M
program,
at that
and
point.
just also our human capital and how we prepare ourselves to walk on our own. And I think we're doing that already. We transitioned into that place.
Yes, ma'am, we absolutely have got a plan in place to start weaning ourselves, if you will, off the program management capabilities, but also to your point, Councilman, about the capital investment in infrastructure, and we are absorbing a lot of the rehabilitation cost now, cleaning, lining, rehabilitating manholes, those sorts of things. That is being absorbed in our O&M budget because that's not a true capital expenditure, that's maintenance work. And so we have started.
At some point, our capital budget is, because if you look at it, we're going to be at what, 24 million of our own cash invested plus, all the financing wings. When do we get in the 2020 to, all right, we've made all the major, we're back to just focusing on maintaining.
Yes, sir. I think we, as the projects have been laid out to meet our capacity assurance program, which is something that the consent decree required us to develop, is basically how do you minimize sanitary sewer overflows, making sure that the pipes are big enough after you've corrected the inflow and infiltration. We've got a lot of projects yet to do. We're probably looking at 5 to 6 year window. We're about to submit those list of projects that the hydraulic modeling and studies have helped us develop. We submit those to EPA, and then those become consent decree deliverables by adjunct attachment to the consent decree. So we're wrapping those projects up now that lays out the capital spend looking forward. A lot of our effort so far has been developing O&M programs. It's how we operate, how we maintain, and how we track and make sure we don't get in a difficult situation where we have a lot of sanitary sewer overflows moving forward. So there's quite a bit of capital spend ahead of us to still get to a position where we're in compliance with that capacity assurance program.
And how much are we doing, MGDs are we doing now?
So on average, our wastewater treatment plant is treating around 35 million gallons a day.
And we
It's
have capacity for
or
80.
60 right now.
60?
Yes, sir. With a potential plan to expand to 80. The issue comes whenever we have rain events. We go well above 60 MGD. We've approached 100 MGD in some of the really, really wet seasons that we had this fall. So, and it's not just a treatment capacity, it's the capacity of the conveyance to get it there. And Lake Catherine's a perfect example. You'll see a project coming up in the not too distant future to invest quite a bit to make those pipes bigger so we minimize sanitary sewer overflows in that localized vicinity.
But at the same time, none of that will help if we don't clean the storm left over in Little Lake Catherine and other feeders, because then we're just clogging up everything. So we need
Certainly.
to
It is
look at that.
certainly a programmatic approach, yes.
So this plan, when we get to that point at the end, we'll still be at the 60 million gallons, right?
Of treatment capacity, yes, sir.
Treatment capacity.
Yes, sir.
So the one thing I haven't seen in any of our plans are what are we doing to fill that capacity with paying customers?
Well, that's your economic development piece, right, and trying to grow the system, so.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, the one thing we need to encourage to grow it within our municipal boundaries, not outside, because the cost of maintaining that and bringing it in is where we got bit several times in the past. It's just too expensive to deliver to the centralized plant.
It's a tool in the economic development toolbox.
Yes, sir.
Costs us more to lay those pipes
Yeah.
way out.
Keep on rolling.
Thank you.
I'm trying to see if I really understood the question. At what point do we get to pulling back?
5, 6 years.
How many years out?
I think from the actual capital investment and breaking even with
Right.
O&M, it's probably gonna be that time frame, 5 to 6 years. We're pulling back now, or beginning a plan now for the program management piece of pulling off of, the resources of CDM on a daily basis. I mean, our staff is, between a lot of the structural changes we've made, Mr. Davis, and then planning, each budget cycle with, certain FTEs that they're requesting and the roles that they'll play. We're gonna be pulling back gradually, I would say, over the next 2 years as far as program management.
That's, the obvious payout there for us is, as you drive through the city, we would see basically just maintenance going on versus repairs and replacement of the infrastructure.
That's more of the 6-year time frame.
Right. That's,
But the program management piece, we're preparing now to be able to handle those, the O&M and on our own.
that becomes another education program for us,
I think
explaining to the public what's going on.
it'd be nice, Ms. Wilson, if we could look as we go into the budget and pull all these things together to make a plan that maybe we try to commit some resources to recruit 5 million gallon users each year for 5 years to use up that capacity to help bring in more revenue that we can expand and grow.
And even do a cost benefit analysis
Yep.
of incentivizing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, just let's identify, because where we're located is where a lot of growth is, and we ought to be able to take advantage of it.
So on the cost of service, as we're discussing, extending service to large use customers, and looking at potentially, what that rate or rates or options could be and could look like from a cost of service perspective. And then the third and final area would be rate design, appropriately, pricing the service, looking about pricing the service.
That's where
Should the service be based on, the price should be based on cost of service or some other policy driven, for example, economic development factor, for example. Another example, as it relates to looking at impacts of the price of the service, you know, I know we're looking at, and we've discussed moving from CCFs to gallons. Potentially, what would the impact of that look like? So that third area will be looking at pricing the service and potentially what those impacts could or could not look like.
Well, I think you need to add into that is the customer service piece, because people don't mind paying extra if they get quality service and answers, and that's something I know they're focused on and getting, but we still, probably the majority of us, that's the number one thing that we deal with, water customer issues. So, you know, when you're setting a rate, it's got to be part of that, and I think that needs to be part of our overall plan.
Understanding the
customer
impact to
service.
the customers. Okay.
And how we respond to it. I mean, we got to make sure that we're getting the customers the information that they need, and it's not hard. If somebody has a water leak or other issues, and it takes days and weeks, and the rates are all over the place, you know, and I know a lot of it hopefully will be taken care of with the automatic metering and the other things that we're working on, but I think that needs to be part of your rate design, because if we can't provide the quality of service, you can't get the rate.
I know you're about to wrap up, Robert. I know it'll be part of your study, but do you have a gut on where our current rates, water and sewer, kind of fit in the Southeast right now? Are we still kind of middle of the road, or what do you think?
I know the last time we looked, which was maybe a year and a half ago, we're somewhat in the middle of the road, but what we can do is the next time we come back, we can have a comparison and explicitly show the comparison of comparable utilities in the Southeast to see where we're at. But I remember we're somewhere in the middle.
In God we trust. Everyone else bring me data, right? So we'll wait for the data. Won't require you to guess down. So okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, and so the next steps: initiate the project, and get going. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Any questions before we close?
I think we probably took copious notes of the questions that were asked about large users, about USCR, and if that can help us with rate. I mean, I like us being at 2.0 coverage. I think we need to stay there. I know the years past we went much lower than that, and you and
No transfers.
You and the guy at the door need over there. We want the 3 A's. So
But
work in that direction.
In all fairness, Mr. Mayor, I wouldn't take any credit. It's really the folks on that back wall.
I wasn't giving you credit. I'll give you blame.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
He'll take that.
If we don't get there, you get all the accountability. We want to keep going in the right direction. No, you guys have been doing a great job. A great job, Robert. As usual.
5.98.
Never thought I wanted to see a rate consultant from Black and Veatch come and give us information, but you've been great the last several years. Really.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Good seeing you, man.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert.
And next time you're sick, Robert, don't send anybody in your stead. Just wait until you're better and just come and do it yourself, okay? All right. Tell your colleagues who said that, all right?
Great, thanks, Robert.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, we will entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session and receive of legal advice related to pending, threatened, or potential claims pursuant to 30-4-7082, Taboo versus City of Columbia. Receipt of legal advice related to matters covered by attorney-client privilege pursuant to A2 smoking ordinance, Hardin Street Safety Enhancement, MACST Board membership, Columbia Housing Authority, Allen Benedict Court, Assembly Street, discussion of negotiations with proposed contractual arrangement pursuant to 7082, Columbia Park, discussion of employment of employee pursuant to 7082, Columbia Police Department.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion is completely unrelated to this motion. I do want to raise the fact I've talked to several members of the legislative delegation. I think it'd be very helpful at some point in the near future to talk to have the delegation meet and discuss with them some of the data from Columbia Compass. Went through some of that with two of our senators. It was enlightening to them, so sharing them some of the data, and then also maybe sharing some of the data from Robert's presentation as well, so they understand some of the accomplishments we're making in that space as well. But a bit of an education as to how this city is unique vis-a-vis other cities in the state right now, and how we might need some legislative solutions to help us meet our goals. But just a really deep and broad education. Some of the data in Columbia Compass in particular, I think we need to plan to do that. So let's start working in that regard.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Move the previous question. Clerk, call the roll.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes, we'll be.
Aye.
All right. Thank you.